You pull into the quick lube place on a Tuesday afternoon. You have been here before. You know the smell. Motor oil and industrial cleaner and the faint sweetness of something burning off a hot exhaust. You hand over your keys. You sit in a plastic chair and you watch a television mounted too high on the wall, showing a program you would never choose to watch at home. 45 minutes later, a man in a branded shirt hands you back your keys and a receipt for $83. He puts a sticker on your windshield. 3 months from now, or 3,000 miles, whichever comes first. You do this 4 times a year. You have done it for 30 years. You have spent somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 on oil changes alone. Not on repairs, not on tires, not on anything that was broken. Just on a scheduled fluid replacement that you were told was non-negotiable, that you never questioned, and that the man handing you the receipt has a financial interest in you continuing to believe. Now, picture something different. A plain coat, a weathered barn outside of Sugar Creek, Ohio. A diesel tractor that has not seen the inside of a dealership in 4 decades sitting in the morning light with its hood up. An older man opens a small tin on the workbench. He works something dark and thick into the engine with a folded rag. He wipes his hands on his trousers. He closes the hood. He starts the tractor. It runs like it was assembled last Tuesday. That tractor has 340,000 miles on it. He has never paid a mechanic in his life. Not once. I drove home from that barn in my 2009 pickup, and I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside, because I had just watched something I could not explain using any framework I had spent 30 years building. And I knew, sitting there in that driveway, that I was going to have to go back and ask questions I did not know how to ask yet. That was the last oil change I ever paid for. Before I show you the formula and before I walk you through exactly how to use it, I want to explain something about how I got here. Because if I just hand you a recipe without context, you are going to do what I would have done 10 years ago. You are going to assume I am missing something. You are going to assume that the automotive engineers and the quick lube industry and the dealership service departments all know something I do not. You are going to assume the complexity is real. It is not real. I spent 31 years in fleet maintenance in Central Ohio. Trucks, heavy equipment, diesel generators for construction sites and agricultural operations. I changed oil for a living. I kept service logs. I tracked engine wear. I believed in the schedule the way most people believe in paying taxes. Not because I had verified that it was necessary, but because the consequences of not doing it seemed too severe to test. The 3-month interval, the specific viscosity rating, the filter replacement, the gasket check, the fluid top-off. I did all of it. I trained younger guys to do all of it. I passed on a set of practices that I had inherited without ever asking where they came from or who benefited from them. Then in the spring of 2019, I met a man I will call Daniel. I am using a different name because he asked me to, and I respect that. Daniel runs a woodworking operation outside of Millersburg, Ohio. Saws, planers, jointers, shapers, a diesel generator that powers the whole shop when he needs it. Every piece of equipment in that barn was old in the way that only well-maintained things get old. Not neglected, not rusting. Just worn smooth and quiet and completely reliable. I asked him who his mechanic was. He looked at me the way a man looks at you when you have asked a question that reveals something about you that you did not intend to reveal. He said, "I am the mechanic." I asked him what oil he used. He walked to a shelf and handed me a small tin without saying anything. I opened it. Inside was a dark mixture, thicker than motor oil, with a faint smell that I could not immediately place. Animal fat and something else. Something waxy. He told me what was in it. 2 ingredients, both available at any farm supply store within 15 miles of where we were standing. Combined cost for enough mixture to treat his diesel generator completely, $1.80. I stood there holding that tin, and I did not say anything for a while, because I was doing arithmetic in my head that I did not like the results of. Let me give you the arithmetic directly, because this is where it starts to get uncomfortable. Modern motor oil is approximately 90% base oil and 10% additive package. The base oil is refined petroleum. The additive package contains detergents to keep combustion byproducts suspended, dispersants to prevent sludge formation, anti-wear compounds that deposit a protective layer on metal surfaces under pressure, viscosity index improvers that keep the oil from thinning too much at high temperatures, and pour point depressants that keep it from thickening too much in cold weather. That entire package costs the manufacturer somewhere between 40 cents and $1.20 per quart to produce, depending on the grade and the source of the base stock. You pay between $8 and $12 per quart at retail. At a quick lube shop, the labor charge for draining your old oil and pouring in the new is typically between $25 and $40 on top of the material cost. The shop pays roughly $4 per quart wholesale. They charge you $11. The labor takes their technician approximately 12 minutes. The business model works because you believe two things that are not true. The first thing you believe is that the specific formulation in that bottle is irreplaceable. That the particular blend of synthetic hydrocarbons and additive chemistry that the manufacturer or the quick lube chain has put in that container is the only thing standing between your engine and catastrophic wear. The second thing you believe is that the replacement interval, 3,000 miles, 5,000 miles, whatever the sticker on your windshield says, is a hard technical requirement derived from engineering data rather than a marketing schedule derived from revenue projections. Neither of those things is true, and the industry has known they are not true for decades. The 3,000-mile oil change interval was not developed by engineers at a laboratory studying oil degradation. It was developed by the quick lube industry in the 1970s as a cadence that would bring customers back 4 times per year instead of 2. The actual degradation rate of a properly formulated oil in a maintained engine running under normal conditions is significantly longer than 3,000 miles. Modern manufacturers know this so well that they have been quietly extending their recommended service intervals for 20 years. Most new vehicles now carry factory recommendations of 7,000, 10,000, or 15,000 miles between changes. Not because the engines got better, because the old intervals could not be defended in court. The Amish did not need a court case to figure any of this out. They just kept their equipment running and their records straight, and they never stopped asking the question that the rest of us forgot to ask. Why does this have to cost what they say it costs? Now let me give you the full history of this formula, because the history is the part that makes the anger make sense. The use of animal-derived lubricants on mechanical equipment in plain communities across Pennsylvania and Ohio goes back well before the petroleum industry existed. In the mid-1800s, when the first Amish settlements were establishing themselves in Lancaster County and later in Holmes County, Ohio, there was no such thing as a commercial motor oil. There was no Pennzoil. There was no Velveline. There was no quick lube chain on the corner. There was rendered animal fat. There was beeswax. There was linseed oil. And there was the accumulated knowledge of communities that had been maintaining farm equipment in Central Europe for 2 centuries before they ever set foot in Pennsylvania. The early Amish mechanics, and I use that term loosely because in those communities every man who owned equipment was his own mechanic, worked from a practical tradition of lubrication that was grounded in what was available and what was observed to work over time. They did not have access to university research. They did not read trade journals. They watched their equipment, and they adjusted their practices based on what the equipment told them. What the equipment told them, over generations of observation, was that a mixture of rendered pork lard and beeswax, applied regularly to working metal surfaces, reduced wear to a degree that was measurable in the lifespan of the equipment. A plow maintained with this mixture lasted longer than a plow that was not. A saw bearing treated with this mixture ran cooler and quieter than one that was dry or treated with something inferior. This knowledge was not written down in the early years. It was passed from father to son, from master to apprentice, from one community to the next, as the settlements spread westward through Ohio and Indiana and Illinois. It was a kind of knowledge that exists in hands before it exists on paper. The first time I found it documented was in a workshop notebook from 1948. I found it in the collection of a small historical library in eastern Ohio that I will not name specifically because the librarian asked me not to send a crowd of people to her door. The notebook belonged to a man whose name I will give you only as Levi K., a woodworker and equipment operator from a community near Charm, Ohio. Levi kept meticulous records: oil treatments, date applied, quantity used, observations on engine behavior in the weeks following treatment. The notebook covers 12 years of maintenance records on 6 pieces of equipment. The formula appears on the 3rd page. 4 parts rendered lard, 1 part beeswax, mixed warm. Applied at intervals determined by the behavior of the equipment rather than by a calendar. That last part is worth stopping on. Determined by the behavior of the equipment rather than by a calendar. Levi K. was not changing his oil because a sticker on his machine told him to. He was changing it when the machine told him to. When the sound changed, when the temperature changed, when the draw of the motor felt different under load. He had learned to read his equipment the way a good farmer reads weather, not by consulting a chart, but by paying attention to what was actually happening. That is a skill that the scheduled maintenance industry has spent 70 years making sure you never develop. Now here is the part that should make every American who owns a vehicle or a piece of equipment stop and sit with the discomfort for a moment. In 1947, a researcher at the Pennsylvania State Agricultural Extension Service named Walter Groff published a monograph on traditional lubricants used in plain community farm equipment across Pennsylvania. The monograph was 41 pages. It documented 17 different formulations in use across Amish and Mennonite communities in Lancaster, Berks, and Lebanon counties. It included wear data, application intervals, and comparison observations against commercial petroleum lubricants of the period. The conclusion of the monograph was stated plainly on page 38. I'm going to paraphrase rather than quote directly because the language of 9/2047 agricultural writing is dense, and I do not want to lose you in it.